and thank you for joining me for Mastering Your Menstruation Part 1. So today we're going to talk about a very simple thing that every woman can do, and that is keeping track of your cycle. So why do we want to keep track of our cycle? Why is that part of mastering our menstruation? Well, there are a couple reasons why it helps us as women to keep track of our cycles. One very basic reason is because it keeps us more in touch with our bodies, our emotional body, our physical body, our psychological body, our spiritual body. It helps us keep track of what's going on at what times. It helps us not be so surprised. It helps us get to know our body better so that we're more comfortable in our skin, we're more confident in our ways, and we're not such a stranger to our own selves. Another important reason is because it helps us not become a victim of our bodies. We are masters. We are no longer victimized. So how many times do we say, oh my God, my period's about to start again, I'm in trouble? Or you hear a woman complaining, don't mind me, I'm just on my cycle. This attitude, I know that it's real and it's totally valid, but it's also playing a role in the victimhood of our cycles. We are not victims to our menstrual cycle. We can be masters of it. We do not have to feel like we're submitting to this horrible thing that we are subjected to every month. We can instead change our attitude, change our perspective to celebrating and enjoying even our cycle and embracing our cycle, and therefore embracing ourselves, embracing our womb, embracing our womanhood, our femininity, our power. So that's one reason why keeping track of your cycle is a form of mastering your menstruation. Also, another basic reason is to just predict when things are about to happen. Once you get familiar with your cycle and you keep track of it, you can start to see the patterns. Okay, so 2 days before my cycle, I know that I usually get headaches. I know that I have a lot of back pain. I know that my first day of my cycle is very heavy. And so what kind of preparations can we take to help us get ready for a healthy and happy cycle? How can we learn to embrace our cycle? Let's say we need to get a special kind of pad, or we need to prepare for a luxurious candlelit bath that always makes us feel better on our first day of our cycle. Or we can plan to take the day off even and fully embrace our time of bleeding and menstruating, and fully embrace our time of slowing down, listening to our bodies, feeling that we are truly taking care of ourselves. So, some suggestions for how to keep track of your cycle. I like to make a separate calendar than my regular calendar. I think things can get a little complicated when you intertwine your work and business life with your physical body. I like to keep them a little separate so that I have more room to look at my calendar, and really the focus is my menstruation. So that's why I like to keep a separate calendar. So I made a little makeshift calendar here. You can see it. So here I did a very hypothetical scenario of what my cycle could potentially look like. So on day 1, I marked it with a little pink dot right there, and for me, that I know that that little pink dot means that I started bleeding. So that's day 1 of my cycle. This little blue dot here symbolizes the day that I stopped bleeding. Now that does not mean that your cycle has ended. That is just your bleeding has ceased, and that's all that little blue dot means. So here I put a little black box, and that signifies the day that I ended my cycle, because my cycle started again, and there's another little pink dot there. So that is my 28-day cycle. Hypothetically, if my cycle was 28 days, that's what I would do. So I would keep track every single day. Okay, so I started here, here's where I stopped bleeding. I went through the calendar, I went through the month, and this little black dot and this little pink dot means that a new cycle started. So you can see here that I've also included some journaling. So I like to journal, one, how heavy my bleeding is. So on day 1, it's usually very heavy, hypothetically, and day 2, it could be still very heavy. So I keep track of how heavy it is. It might turn to mild, it might turn to very light, it might turn to heavy again. Just keeping track of your cycle without judgment, without expectation. Just keep track of how heavy your bleeding is. Another thing I kept track of was the color of my blood. Now, not many women are comfortable looking at their own blood, but this is very important because your blood signifies how healthy you are. So every single cycle is a manifestation, a physical manifestation of your body's health. If your blood is a certain color, it signifies a certain aspect and a certain chemical or hormonal imbalance that you may be experiencing. So I recorded that on day 1, my blood was dark red. On day 2, it was light red. Day 3 was still light red, and finally on the 4th day, it was light pink. So that's what I kept track of, how you keep track of your blood. You can use a Diva cup, that's how I keep track of my blood color, or you can simply look at your tampon when you change it again. So another thing I like to keep track of is my PMS. So my PMS might start the day of or the day before. So the day before my first cycle started here, I recorded that I had some strong pain in my uterus. And throughout the month, I felt pretty good. And then towards my new cycle, about 2 days before my new cycle started, I experienced headache, maybe a little bit of back pain. On the day right before my cycle, I also recorded that I experienced a very strong emotional day, and I had no pain. So these are a couple things to keep track of. So 1, the heaviness of your cycle, of your blood. 2, the color of your blood. 3, your physical pain or physical issues, your PMS symptoms. And 4 is going to be your emotions. Whether you're having a very good day, your general mood is very light and happy, or maybe you experience some crazy winds and thrashes of emotions, or maybe you had a very, very strong, low-key emotional day. You just needed to get away. You needed some rest. So just keep track of these 4 things through your cycle calendar. And that is how, part 1, we can become a masters of our menstruation. And so I hope to see you next time for part 2 of Mastering Your Menstruation, and thank you for joining me.